Samantha had grown used to the quiet rhythm of her life after her long-term relationship ended. The kind of quiet where evenings were spent reading on the couch and weekends were filled with simple routines, until her best friend Claire decided it was time to shake things up. "I've set you up with someone, just one dinner, and if you hate it, I'll never bother you again," Claire said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and excitement, handing Samantha the details of a blind date she hadn't expected and didn't feel entirely ready for. Samantha hesitated, feeling a mix of nerves and curiosity. She hadn't imagined herself diving back into the world of dating, especially with someone she didn't know. Yet there was something in Claire's persistence that made it hard to refuse. That Saturday evening, she arrived at a small, cozy bistro in downtown Chicago, the streetlights casting a golden glow as she approached the entrance, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Inside, the place hummed with quiet conversations, the clink of glasses, and the soft notes of jazz drifting from a corner speaker, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. She scanned the room nervously until her eyes fell on Daniel, who was sitting at a table near the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes attentive, scanning the crowd until they met hers. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to light up his whole face, and Samantha felt a flutter in her chest she hadn't experienced in years, a combination of nerves, curiosity, and something that felt dangerously like excitement. As she approached, Daniel stood, his voice calm and welcoming as he said, "Hi, you must be Samantha. I'm Daniel. It's nice to finally meet you." And she noticed a subtle warmth in his tone that immediately made her feel more at ease. They sat down, ordering drinks to start, and the conversation began cautiously, touching on light topics, how the week had been, favorite foods, the comfort of certain books or movies, but gradually shifted to deeper topics, revealing glimpses of their personalities, fears, and small quirks that made each laugh and lean in a little closer. Samantha found herself opening up in ways she hadn't planned, sharing childhood memories, small regrets, and dreams for the future. And she realized that Daniel was listening with genuine interest, nodding, smiling, and occasionally laughing in all the right places, making her feel seen in a way that was rare and comforting. The air between them seemed charged with an energy neither could ignore, a mixture of tension and ease that made even the simplest exchanges feel significant. Daniel shared stories of his own life, moments of triumph, embarrassing mistakes, and the lessons he had learned along the way. And Samantha felt a connection forming, subtle but undeniable, as if they were discovering a rhythm together that didn't require effort, but felt perfectly natural. Laughter came easily, spilling over into moments of thoughtful silence where they simply looked at each other, absorbing the presence and subtle movements of the other, the faint brush of hands, the way their eyes met over the rim of glasses, each small interaction layered with unspoken curiosity and attraction. As the evening unfolded, Samantha's initial nervousness began to fade, replaced by a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time, the kind that made her wonder if this night could be more than just a casual dinner set up by a well-meaning friend. Just as she started to relax completely, enjoying the warmth of the restaurant and the easy flow of conversation, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it quickly, a flicker of tension crossing his face before he politely excused himself to take the call outside. Samantha sat alone for a moment, her thoughts racing, trying to piece together the strange mix of emotions she was experiencing: curiosity, attraction, and a sudden, inexplicable worry. When Daniel returned, his smile tried to mask the seriousness she had glimpsed, but the shadow in his eyes made her heart skip. They resumed their conversation, and Samantha found herself even more intrigued by him, noticing subtle hints of depth in his laughter, a quiet intensity in the way he listened, and an honesty in the way he shared himself. The night moved forward with a gentle rhythm, their stories weaving together like threads forming a tapestry, each anecdote revealing layers of personality and emotion that made Samantha feel a connection she hadn't expected to find on a blind date. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave, Daniel suggested a walk along the nearby river, the city lights reflecting in the water, soft music from a distant cafe blending with the quiet murmur of the evening. The walk felt magical, almost suspended in time, each step creating small moments of shared laughter and subtle glances, a growing intimacy that neither had planned but both were drawn into. Samantha realized that this night, which began as a casual setup, had quietly transformed into something more profound, a moment where the past heartbreaks and hesitations seemed to fade just enough to allow for the possibility of something new. Yet, Just as she was starting to feel completely at ease, Daniel's earlier tension lingered in her mind like a question without an answer, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this night held surprises she hadn't yet anticipated, leaving her heart both hopeful and uncertain, eager to discover what lay ahead, but knowing that the story of this evening was far from over. Samantha sat on the edge of her seat as Daniel stepped outside to take the call, her heart fluttering with a mix of curiosity and unease, wondering what news could have interrupted the gentle flow of their evening. The bistro's soft music and warm lighting suddenly felt distant, as if the room itself had paused, leaving her alone with her swirling thoughts and the quiet hum of conversation around her. She sipped her water slowly, feeling the tension coil in her chest, trying not to let it ruin the unexpected comfort she had begun to feel in Daniel's presence. When he returned, his smile was polite, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of worry, a shadow she couldn't ignore, and it made her even more aware of the layers in him she hadn't yet understood. They continued their conversation cautiously, moving from light topics into deeper waters, discussing ambitions, childhood memories, the lessons life had forced them to learn, and the quiet regrets that shaped their decisions, each word revealing more of Daniel's character and allowing Samantha to lower her guard in ways she hadn't anticipated. She found herself laughing freely at his dry humor, sharing small secrets and confessions she usually reserved for those she trusted, and noticing the subtle intensity in his gaze when he spoke, as though he genuinely wanted to understand her, to meet her where she was. The connection between them grew stronger, palpable, and electric, and Samantha realized she was no longer thinking of this as a simple blind date. It had become something more, something that stirred feelings she had buried long ago. As they talked, the shadows of the evening lengthened, and the bistro began to empty, yet neither wanted to break the fragile spell that had formed over their shared table. Daniel suggested they take a walk along the river to enjoy the crisp night air, and Samantha agreed, intrigued by the unexpected intimacy of the moment, feeling the warmth of his presence as they stepped onto the quiet streets. The city lights reflected off the water, flickering in the gentle ripples, and the distant strains of music from a nearby cafe added to the magic of the night. Each step felt deliberate, yet effortless, as if their hearts were keeping pace with each other's, building a rhythm that neither had anticipated, but both welcomed. Then Daniel paused, his expression softening, his voice low and almost hesitant as he said, "Samantha, I need to tell you something." And Samantha felt her pulse quicken, her mind racing through possibilities, some thrilling, some terrifying, all weighted with the unknown. Before he could continue, a familiar laugh broke the moment, slicing through the quiet of the night, and Samantha's eyes were drawn to a woman approaching from across the street, waving and smiling at Daniel in a way that suggested intimacy and familiarity. Samantha's stomach lurched as recognition sparked unease, and Daniel's eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and tension, the words he had been about to speak hanging unfinished between them. The woman, whose presence was unexpected and seemingly significant, came closer, greeting Daniel with warmth, hugging him briefly, their shared familiarity obvious and undeniable. Samantha's mind raced, trying to process what she had just witnessed, the sudden clash of attraction and potential betrayal igniting a storm of emotions inside her, from jealousy and confusion to curiosity and caution. Daniel turned to Samantha, his expression pleading, almost apologetic, murmuring, "It's complicated." And Samantha could sense the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on him, the reality that his life was layered with experiences, connections, and perhaps mistakes she had not anticipated encountering on this first night. They stood there, the river at their side, city lights shimmering around them, the air charged with tension, each heartbeat marking a delicate balance between trust and doubt, curiosity and caution, attraction and uncertainty. Despite the shock of seeing the other woman, Samantha felt a strange pull toward Daniel, a desire to understand him, to uncover the reasons behind the complexities that had unexpectedly intruded on what had been a night of laughter, openness, and budding connection. As they resumed their walk, the conversation became sparse, punctuated by hesitant glances and unspoken questions, yet the connection that had sparked earlier refused to fade. A silent reminder that feelings are rarely neat or simple, and that sometimes the heart recognizes something it cannot explain, even in the presence of complications. The walk continued under the soft glow of street lamps, their shadows stretching along the cobblestones, the river flowing silently beside them, a mirror to the swirling emotions neither fully understood but both felt intensely. Samantha realized that this night had shifted everything she thought she knew about herself, about trust, about attraction, and about the possibility of opening her heart again, even when the circumstances were messy and unpredictable. The tension between what she wanted to feel and the reality she had just witnessed created a complex landscape of emotions she had to navigate, a blend of hope, fear, excitement, and caution, all coexisting in a fragile balance. As they reached the edge of the river, Samantha noticed the way Daniel's hands moved slightly when he spoke, the subtle nervous energy he carried, the genuine vulnerability hidden beneath his calm exterior, and she felt a mix of compassion and intrigue that drew her closer to him despite the confusion. The night ended with an unspoken promise hanging in the air, a moment suspended between them, a delicate thread of connection that had survived the unexpected interruption and hinted at something deeper, a possibility neither could fully define, yet both felt growing with every heartbeat. Samantha left that night with her mind swirling, her heart both cautious and eager, replaying every smile, every glance, every laugh, and the image of the other woman etched sharply in her memory, leaving her with a bittersweet ache that was equal parts curiosity, longing, and the undeniable pull of emotions that refused to be ignored, knowing that the story of this night was far from over and that whatever came next would challenge the boundaries of her heart and the limits of her courage. Samantha's chest tightened as she watched the woman approach Daniel, her smile familiar, her gestures warm and easy, and she felt a storm of conflicting emotions she wasn't ready to name. Daniel's expression shifted from calm to something heavier, almost guilty, and he muttered softly, "Samantha, I didn't expect her tonight," his voice carrying the weight of unspoken complications. The woman, Claire, coincidentally sharing the name of Samantha's best friend, laughed lightly, and Daniel's body relaxed for a brief moment as he hugged her briefly, exchanged a few words Samantha couldn't hear, but the fragments she caught made her stomach churn, mentions of plans, shared memories, promises she didn't understand. Samantha's mind raced, trying to process the collision of attraction and tension, the undeniable pull she felt toward Daniel and the sudden fear that his life was more complicated than she had imagined. Daniel turned toward her, his eyes searching, pleading almost, as he said quietly, "It's complicated." And Samantha felt a mixture of frustration, curiosity, and heartbreak swirl within her, unsure whether to step back or lean in, drawn by the honesty she saw in his gaze, despite the confusing reality. They walked silently for a few steps, the city lights reflecting on the river, each heartbeat loud in Samantha's ears, the night carrying the weight of unspoken words and emotions she couldn't ignore. She thought about the way he had made her laugh, how easily she had opened up, the warmth of his smile, and yet the sudden appearance of the other woman made her question everything. Did she misread him, or had he misled her without intending to? As they continued along the river, Samantha noticed subtle changes in Daniel's manner, the hesitation in his voice, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted occasionally toward the street they had just passed, and she realized that he carried secrets, parts of his life she wasn't yet allowed to see, yet the vulnerability in him made her heart ache with empathy and desire all at once. Despite the confusion, she couldn't deny the chemistry, the way conversation had flowed effortlessly before the interruption, the little sparks of connection she felt when he laughed, the soft intensity in the way he listened, and the quiet thrill of being seen in a way she hadn't been seen in a long time. Her mind fought against the pull of reality, questioning whether she could trust someone whose life appeared tangled with another, yet her heart whispered that there was more beneath the surface, layers of honesty and longing that made her curious to understand him fully. The air around them felt charged, the night alive with possibilities and fears, and Samantha realized that emotions are rarely neat or predictable. They are messy, urgent, and demanding of attention, and this night had delivered them all in a flood she wasn't prepared for. They stopped at a quiet bench by the water, and Daniel finally spoke, choosing his words carefully, admitting that his life had complexities, that he had connections he couldn't simply erase, but also confessing a growing feeling for Samantha that surprised even him, a pull he hadn't expected but couldn't ignore. Samantha listened, her heart swinging between skepticism and hope, fear and desire, as she tried to balance the reality of his past and present with the undeniable connection she felt with him, the warmth that lingered in her chest, and the ache that rose whenever she remembered his smile. She questioned herself, wondering if attraction could survive such complications, if hearts could navigate tangled histories without breaking, yet the truth was that she already cared, already felt drawn to him in ways that logic could not explain. As they sat together, the night deepened, the sounds of the city fading into a quiet backdrop, leaving only the rhythm of their own conversation and the unspoken tension that hung in the air, heavy yet strangely exhilarating, as if every moment carried the potential to change everything. Daniel's hand brushed hers accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, and Samantha felt a jolt of warmth, a spark that reminded her why she had agreed to this date in the first place, why the risk felt worth it despite the confusion, the emotional complexity, and the shadow of another person in his life. She realized that love, or at least the start of it, often arrives messy, unexpected, and challenging, and sometimes it demands courage, patience, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty. The night continued with quiet pauses, meaningful glances, and careful conversations, each moment testing her curiosity, her heart, and her boundaries, leaving her exhausted yet exhilarated, fearful yet eager, fully aware that the path forward was unclear but irresistible. As they finally parted ways for the evening, Samantha's mind was a whirlwind of feelings. Longing for more, questions about loyalty and honesty, fascination with the connection she felt, and the painful but thrilling awareness that her heart had been stirred in ways she hadn't expected, setting the stage for choices she would soon have to make. Walking home, she replayed the evening over and over, the image of Daniel's eyes, the laugh shared with the other woman, the warmth of his presence, and the undeniable pull between them, realizing that the night had shifted something inside her, awakening hope and desire, yet also fear and uncertainty, leaving her suspended in a delicate tension that promised emotional storms, romantic possibilities, and dramatic confrontations in the days to come, knowing that this was only the beginning of a story that could change everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and herself. Samantha couldn't stop thinking about Daniel in the days after their interrupted date, the memory of his smile, the warmth of his eyes, and the awkward tension with the other woman replaying over and over in her mind, leaving her restless yet unable to resist the pull she felt toward him. She wrestled with a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and caution, knowing that her heart was walking a fragile line between hope and potential heartbreak, and yet she realized that ignoring her feelings felt impossible. Finally, she decided to reach out, needing clarity, honesty, and understanding before her thoughts consumed her completely. And when Daniel agreed to meet again, the anticipation was electric, charged with questions, emotions, and a yearning neither could deny. They met at a quiet cafe by the river, the same soft light reflecting on the water, and Samantha felt her nerves and excitement collide as Daniel approached, his smile warm but his expression tinged with seriousness, as though he carried the weight of the previous encounter with him. As they sat across from each other, the air seemed thick with unspoken tension, yet there was an undeniable comfort in the familiarity of their conversation, the way words flowed effortlessly, even as the emotional undercurrent pulled at both of them, drawing them closer in ways neither had anticipated. Daniel spoke first, his voice low and earnest, admitting the truth of his complicated past, the tangled connections that had unexpectedly appeared the night they met, and the mistakes he had made, yet also confessing that in meeting Samantha, he felt something rare, a spark and an emotional resonance that had startled him and refused to fade, leaving him conflicted but certain that he wanted to explore the possibility of something real with her. Samantha listened, her heart pounding, torn between the caution her mind demanded and the undeniable emotions her heart had already chosen, feeling the intensity of attraction, the longing for connection, and the weight of trust all pressing upon her at once, and she realized that love, or at least the beginning of it, was rarely simple, safe, or neat, and that to ignore it would be to deny the stirring of her own heart. She asked questions, seeking honesty, wanting to understand how he could balance the complexities of his life with a genuine desire to connect with her, and Daniel answered with transparency, revealing his vulnerabilities, fears, and hopes, showing a side of him that was sincere and raw, the kind of openness that both terrified and captivated Samantha, making her feel both protective of her own heart and daring enough to take a risk. They spoke about feelings, intentions, and the uncertainty that surrounded them, each word carefully chosen but imbued with a natural warmth that reminded Samantha why she had felt drawn to him in the first place, the connection undeniable and compelling despite the shadows of his past. As the conversation deepened, Daniel reached for her hand across the table, a gentle, grounding gesture that made Samantha's chest tighten with a mixture of longing and reassurance. The human touch bridging the emotional distance that had existed moments before and reinforcing the possibility that something meaningful could grow between them if they were both willing to take the leap. The city lights reflected on the river outside the window, and the quiet hum of evening life became a soft soundtrack to their shared moment, emphasizing the intimacy and significance of their reunion, a subtle but powerful reminder that the world outside could wait while they explored the fragile and thrilling connection forming between them. Samantha realized that the past, with all its complications, mistakes, and entanglements, could not define this new possibility, that sometimes love required a willingness to embrace uncertainty, risk vulnerability, and trust that the heart knows paths the mind cannot always foresee. She felt a quiet resolve settle in her chest, a mixture of hope, courage, and anticipation, knowing that the journey ahead would not be free of challenges, but that the emotional resonance she felt with Daniel was worth navigating the complexities, worth stepping into uncharted territory, with a heart open enough to embrace both joy and risk. Daniel mirrored her feelings, his eyes reflecting relief, excitement, and a vulnerability that made the moment electric, a mutual acknowledgement that the connection they shared was real, immediate, and demanding attention, forcing both to confront emotions they had not planned to feel but could no longer ignore. As they left the cafe, the night air crisp and filled with possibility, they walked side by side along the river, sharing small smiles, quiet laughter, and tentative touches, each step reinforcing the bond that had unexpectedly formed, the unspoken promise of exploration, understanding, and emotional intimacy hanging between them, delicate yet undeniable. Samantha's mind replayed every detail of their encounter, from the honesty of Daniel's words to the warmth of his presence, and she felt a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness, aware that the road ahead would be complicated, but also knowing that the intensity of their connection made it impossible to turn back, impossible to ignore the pull of the heart over the caution of logic. She recognized that life and love were rarely clean or simple, that emotional growth often demanded vulnerability, patience, and courage, and yet the thrill of discovering Daniel, of feeling seen and understood in ways that stirred both longing and hope, was a journey she was willing to embrace. By the time they parted that evening, Samantha felt a shift within herself, a recognition that the night had changed everything, that her heart was awakened, and that the story she had begun with cautious curiosity now carried the potential for profound love, bittersweet lessons, and a romance that would challenge her assumptions, touch her deeply, and leave her forever changed. Walking home under the city lights, every sensation heightened. The gentle breeze, the distant murmur of life, the echo of his laughter, she realized that the blind date that had begun as a small act of friendship had blossomed into an emotional awakening, a turning point that promised both heartache and joy, mystery and clarity, a delicate balance of longing and fulfillment, leaving her both terrified and exhilarated, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that love, in its most authentic form, often arrives messy, unexpected, and beautiful, transforming ordinary nights into unforgettable beginnings, and she felt, deep in her chest, that this story, her story with Daniel, was only just beginning, a journey of trust, passion, and tender discovery that would unfold in ways she could never have imagined.